I've got a question, actually, because 5 speakers. I'm going to do my best to make this entertaining, I promise you. So we'll see what we go. I've got only one slide. That 41 to 50, right, if you do a bad speech or a good speech, are you being agile and we go up or down that chart depending on the speech? That would be really cool. You should do that.
Real time.
Where am I now? And then you can sort of push me back or down depending on this at the end. Yeah. No? No, okay. All right. A bit of background. So I was at Marks & Spencer 8 years, and then I've joined Reckitt Benckiser, RRB. I don't know how much people know about that. We're a big product company. We are capitalised, I think, at number 13 or 14 in the FTSE 100. You'll recognise many of our products, Nurofen, Dettol, Silip Bang, Durex, etc. So it's a whole big, wide range of products. I thought I'd start off with a couple of things that I've heard recently. I'm not going to talk about CDOs and things like that as well, but one thing that you do get quite frequently, and I think hopefully people have experienced the same type of thing, is you get asked, can't you just stick that in the cloud? Can't you do something with SaaS, which is, you know, that special army workforce, or software as a service, I think, in our language. When I was at Marks & Spencer, I got the, can't you just nip down to PC World and go and buy one of those for SAP? It doesn't quite work like that. But what I've tried to depict on this chart is, I think, the kind of 2 challenges that we've got to work with at the moment as IT directors or CIOs or CDOs or whatever we want to call ourselves. Because on the right-hand side, we've got all the stuff that I think's been referred to before, and I don't disagree with anything that was said from the other speakers as well. All about, you know, trying to do things in a more agile way, be slightly more innovative, etc. But on the left-hand side, we've got all the kind of boring stuff, which means we get fired if we don't get that right. So scalability, for example, if I go back to my Marks & Spencer work, making sure the website worked, for example, over the last 4 days, that requires planning. That you can't do that in an agile way, or if you can, then someone can come teach me about it. But that requires us to sit there, do planning, do volume forecasting, work out what it is, put the servers in place, and blah, 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 blah. So that's like a left-hand side thing. And I've seen, without mentioning any names, there are a number of companies, I think, that have gone all the way over to the right-hand side, where the CIOs have perhaps been... I'm going to be quite controversial like Dave as well, so you don't necessarily have to agree with everything I was going to say. But where I think they've been slightly seduced by agile and digital and software engineering and all those kind of cool things, a bit like the Millennium Bug and all that type of stuff that many of us sold in consultancy a few years ago. And I've gone all the way over to the right-hand side, and I believe if you try and do that for everything, you're going to get yourself into serious trouble. And there are some companies, and there's been a few stories out in some of our papers as well that we all read, where companies have gone all the way to the right-hand side, and you have seen a departure, because that's not necessarily the right way to do things. I think you've got to be able to manage both. So what does that mean? This is the chart I've taken. I've left our branding still on the bottom, actually, but this is a chart I'm taking to our board as well to explain precisely how I want the IS function, it's called IS, to work in the future. You cannot do infrastructure. We're in the middle of SAP. I don't know how to do a big SAP implementation across the whole globe in an agile way, I'll be honest with you. However, I think you can use what's happening on the right-hand side to improve the left-hand side, if that makes sense. So what I have challenged each of the different domain heads, or whatever you call it, the team of people that work for me directly, is to say, how can you use some of the agile ways of working on the left-hand side, recognising that you are still going to have to do things like, waterfall, which are considered to be a little bit boring and dull, but you are still going to have to use those type of approaches. But how can you challenge yourself to do something maybe within the waterfall methodology, which is a little bit more agile or a little bit faster, and use the right-hand side, if you like, of the organisation to motivate and to make things do in a slightly different way, in a slightly faster way, maybe working with vendors, etc. The other thing which I wanted to bring up is the people side as well. Right from working with apples. So, for example, the people that work in my organisation in high tech, or whatever you want to call it, won't work with the sort of standard laptops that we have, which are not exactly the most expensive, because I'm trying to keep the cost down, and I can't afford apples across the whole organisation. So I've got to be very careful about that. But then you can't employ software engineers in their 20s and say, can you work with this kind of Dell from 4 years ago, and that's the corporate kind of kit, and you can't install this on there, and you can't do that because it's a lockdown and all that type of stuff. That's just not an option. But when you are talking about a massive field force, which many of us look after, you can't also have giving everybody apples because you haven't got the kind of budget that can afford that. So you've got to find a way of getting those two, culture and ways of working, and even the kit and the big screens and all of this kind of stuff, and open plan offices, environments, white walls, working with the corporate kind of thing, and make the two environments feel comfortable working with each other, because they do touch. They do touch. That's one of the points that definitely comes across, and one of the lessons that I learned from Marks & Spencer is when you want to do something really innovative and you pick on the winner, and I'll come back and talk about some winners in a minute, inevitably they require touching the corporate systems, whatever your corporate systems are. Because if you've got to change the way you're going to order something, or change the way you're going to pay something, and then you get the people on the right-hand side saying, well, I'd love to scale it, but corporate IT won't let me, because they want to do things like testing before we kind of, break our payment systems and stuff like that, or data security or cyber security and all that kind of stuff, which is really important for kind of making sure that you don't have a P45 at the end of the month. So I think it's all about how you get those two organisations working well together in terms of people, in terms of culture. On the right-hand side, I thought I would cover some of the winning technologies. So I'm not going to repeat what's been said before, because I completely concur with the test and learn and MVP-type solutions and stuff like that. I'll give you an example. Based at Marks & Spencer, because I don't know what digital looks like in my new organisation yet, we're working that out, and we are going to do an awful lot of test and learn, and we're going to do an awful lot on big data as well, or data analytics, because for all the same reasons that Dave talked about at Staples. It's absolutely where we've got to get to. And I support what you were saying about going into that space, just for what it's worth as well, definitely. It's absolutely where we're going to go as well, so it's interesting to hear that. At Marks & Spencer, we tried an awful lot of different digital solutions and experiments. And if you look inside the stores, you can see quite a technology-rich environment, and we spent quite a fair bit of money. The one that delivered the biggest business case, and it is the most obvious one, and you think to yourself, well, why didn't you think of that earlier, was giving our colleagues an iPad in the stores. 1,500 iPads we handed out in the stores. So you imagine, if you think about where it works, you're trying to buy a suit in a Marks & Spencer, and you haven't got quite your size in the trousers or whatever on display or whatever, it's kind of gone out of stock, and you have a store colleague who leaps in with an iPad and a chip and pin next to it so they can take payment very quickly, and they say, I'll just order you that. Poof, done. That, without doubt, was the simplest and the best value thing that we did by a massive margin. And it is and that's digital. It's pretty simple, and it took us quite a long time and quite a lot of money to get there. So I think that's just testament to, once you find something, make sure you go with it. Make sure you can scale it as well, because we had to think of all different solutions like payment providers and how we were going to do pay and link up to the POS system and all the ordering systems and blah, blah, blah. But there's an awful lot that required both sides. But it really was, without doubt, the most simple and the most obvious thing which made the most amount of money. And it was very interesting listening to the Starbucks conversation as well about all these different things you're trying, and actually people aren't that interested just yet. And we found exactly the same thing. So it is entirely the same. Now I'm trying to apply that into a new world, and I don't think CPG companies have yet worked out what digital means, or if they have, someone can come tell me later. I haven't worked it out yet, but I think it's in around the area of data analytics, and there's an awful lot I think we can do in the space. So as I said, I completely concur with what was said before. So summary, I don't know if I've moved up or down on that basis of that, but I think it is about the two organisations working together I don't believe in going completely agile. I think there's definitely a place for it, but you can't forget all of the basic type things which sit on the left-hand side of the organisation. You've got to get those two working together. Thank you.